Hey guys, I feel like I haven't vlogged in a while, so I figured I would put a little something together. I'd started this series that I was going to try to do on Instagram called Education with Elge, where I picked a topic or people would recommend a topic to me that they wanted more information about. Do some research on it, kind of go off personal experience, and just something, a little more informative and just to kind of spread the wealth. So I think I'm going to start that on YouTube. Start that on this channel just because talking about things is a lot easier than having to type it all out on Instagram. Like, I also just hate typing on my phone because I feel like I'm so bad at it. But a topic I figured I would start with would be intuitive eating versus if it fits your macros, just because those are the two that I have the most experience with. I have done meal plans during prep, like towards the end of it, and those are meal preps are good if meal plans, I should say, are good if you are like working towards a specific goal and you need to be really strict. But like day-to-day life, personally, I am not a fan of it. I do like the fact that you don't have to think about it, but other than that, it's too restrictive for me personally. Some people really like it and do really well with it, and that's awesome, but I might be a little too biased on it, so that's something I'd have to research more before I felt comfortable like talking about it. So intuitive eating and if it fits your macros. Two very different things, but in some ways very similar. So let me start with if it fits your macros. So if it fits your macros basically is what it sounds like. You have set macros that you try to reach. You've got a goal for protein, you've got a goal for carbs, and you've got a goal for fats. Again, kind of depending on whether or not you're working on a strict specific goal, you have to be more mindful of what foods you choose. But otherwise, technically, if it fits your macros, it's fair game, whether that be a head of lettuce or 5 Oreos, whatever it is. As long as you have the macros for it, you can have it. Like if you are working to lose weight, at the end of the day, as long as you're in a caloric deficit, what you eat doesn't really matter if your sole purpose is to lose fat, or to lose weight, I should say. But in like when situations like for me, like when I'm in prep, I'm a lot more conscious of what kind of foods I choose. Like, yes, I could have the 5 Oreos, but that's like a lot of grams of fat and a lot of carbs, but not super filling. Whereas with those same macros, I could have like a cup of jasmine rice and an avocado and 3 ounces of chicken or whatever, like something way more satisfying and like at the end of the day a lot better for me. I personally really like tracking macros just because when I went into my first prep, I was somebody who underate. Like, I was afraid, quote unquote, to eat a lot because I didn't want to gain weight or whatever. I worked so hard to get the weight off after college, I didn't want to put it back on. What I didn't realize was that undereating isn't any better for you. I'm not gonna make gains in the gym if I'm not fueling my body properly. If I'm not getting enough protein, if I'm not eating enough carbs, if I'm not eating enough fats, like, you're not gonna make the progress that you want to make. So having to track macros just kind of made me aware of how much I really can eat and should eat. And it just also gave me a better understanding of what's in my foods macro wise. Like, I have a better understanding of how much protein is like in 4 ounces of chicken or in 2 eggs. I have a better idea of how many carbs are in a cup of rice, what a cup of rice even looks like on a plate, what 3 ounces of sweet potato looks like, just like stuff like that. I have a lot better understanding now because I've been tracking for almost 2 years, just like what my food makeup is and just what I need to kind of aim for when I'm not tracking. It just keeps me accountable. That's what it is. Tracking macros keeps me accountable. So personally, I really like tracking macros. Just so I have an idea of kind of where I'm landing for the day, and that I have kind of a feeling and an understanding of whether or not I'm eating enough. Now, macros aren't good for everybody. If you are somebody who really doesn't have any basic understanding or basic experience with tracking food or counting calories or whatever, starting with if it fits your macros might be hard for you. Like, you're gonna probably need a little more guidance than just here are your macros, you know. If you are someone with disordered eating, or currently with disordered eating, or with a history of disordered eating, it may not be good for you, just because tracking macros can be very controlling, and you can get very caught up in the numbers and obsessed with the numbers. And, you know, in certain situations, like in prep, you kind of have to obsess over the numbers. But now, like everyday life, like for me, I don't have to, but it can be very easy to get caught up in it and just obsessed with the numbers, tracking everything to the gram, to the 1/10 of an ounce. And, you know, in those kind of situations, tracking macros is just as much of an eating disorder as, let's say, anorexia is. So, you know, if you've got like a very like OCD personality, like, yeah, I'm type A, but I kind of know when to turn it on and off. Like in my off season, when I'm tracking, I don't measure everything out on the scale. I feel comfortable eyeballing. So yeah, my macros may not be like exactly on point, but that's okay. Like, that is life. I don't need to be anal retentive about it all year long, because that is also exhausting, and that's also not healthy eating behavior. So those kind of situations may not be very good for you. Tracking macros could be good for you if you are working towards a specific goal, like cutting for a competition or trying to gain weight, whether that be just fat or fat and muscle. If you're trying to lose weight and you have some experience with tracking your food, tracking calories, tracking macros, if you have some experience with it, it can be good to make it like a lifestyle. So that's kind of, you know, long story short of what if it fits your macros is. It's, you know, it's like one of those things that's like pretty popular on social media. I mean, that's how I first learned about it. I would see people posting IIFYM, and I was like, oh, what does that mean? I think the hardest part can be just like determining what your macros are, or, you know, what they should be. But it's also kind of fun to play around with. Like, you know, protein is like pretty set. Like, you're gonna want to aim for 1 gram to 1.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight. So that's kind of always going to be set. You're not necessarily really going to change that all that much. But then it's kind of fun to play around with carbs and fats, you know. So maybe you respond really well to carbs. So 50% of your calorie intake is going to be carbs, and then, you know, you're going to split the rest between protein and fat. Or maybe your body responds better to fat. So maybe, you know, I wouldn't say you should eat 50% of your calories from fat. You're probably going to want to do less than that. But you could, you know, instead of doing 50% carbs, you could do 40% carbs and give an extra 10% to your fats. And just, it's fun to play around with, you know. Obviously, whatever macros you start at, give yourself a couple of weeks. Don't try it for 2 days and be like, oh my God, I'm not seeing any progress. I got to change my macros. You have to give it a couple of weeks. You have to give your body time to just adjust to the macros that you're eating at, and to then respond to them. Like personally, I respond better, I have found, to higher carb. Like if a majority of my calories come from carbs, you know, protein is always kind of static for me, and then playing around with fats. But I have found that my body responds better to higher carb than higher fat. And so that, you know, but that took me over a year to learn. So it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of just playing around with it, figuring out what your body responds to and what works well for your body. And then kind of going from there, you know, if your goal is, and also, you know, using those first couple of weeks to figure out kind of what your baseline caloric need is, to just stay the same, to not gain weight, to not lose weight. There are plenty of calculators online that you can kind of start with. You know, it's obviously, those calculators aren't going to be tailored necessarily to your body makeup or to your metabolism, but just to give you like a general idea, and then you kind of have an idea of where you need to start at, and then either add calories from there or take calories away from there, depending on what your goals are. So just like I said, I think tracking macros is a good way to just kind of like look at what you're eating, how much you're eating of stuff, what the values of those foods are, and then correlating that to how your body responds. So personally, I'm a big fan. But then on the flip side, there's intuitive eating. And coming off of my competition season last year, when my coach first started incorporating intuitive days, I'll admit it kind of stressed me out, because I had been tracking macros, you know, like every day for 7 months, that at that point I didn't really remember necessarily how it felt to eat quote unquote normally. So, you know, if you're someone who's been tracking, it can be kind of scary at first, but this year I've got like a way better appreciation for it. Like, yes, I have my macros that I track, but then it's also really nice to have a day or 2 or 3 every week where you're like, you know what, I'm not going to worry about the numbers. I'm just going to listen to my body. I'm going to give it what it wants, what it needs. I'll eat when I'm hungry, stop when I'm not. You know, just be intuitive, just be basic again. There's so many diets and so many rules out there nowadays that it's like hard to even know how to listen to your body anymore, because from a young age all of these rules are ingrained in our minds, you know. And so it's kind of just taking it back to basics. It's kind of just rewinding and being like, all right, body, like I'm going to be in tune with you, and you know, you're telling me you want rice and chicken and broccoli. Okay, that's what I'm going to eat because that's what you're asking me for. Eating intuitively doesn't mean eating like an asshole. It just, you know, you have to still be cognizant of what you're eating, you know, where your calories are coming from and what kind of nutrients you're getting. Like, you have to have a good base, a good, you know, foundation, I would say personally, before you can really dive into intuitive eating and being mindful about it and making good decisions. Because, like, if you've got goals you're working towards, you can do that as an intuitive eater in certain situations, but you have to really have a really good foundation. So like for me, tracking for so long, like I said, has given me a good general understanding of what is in my food and kind of what kind of nutrients and how much of nutrients the foods that I eat are giving me. So, you know, that doesn't mean I eat super clean all the time. Like if I want Oreos, I'll have a couple, but I'm, you know, I make that is a mindful decision that I make. I decide, you know what, I'm craving a bowl of cereal or vanilla Chex, or you know what, I'm craving a couple of Oreos. And I'm not going to restrict myself from them because that also isn't healthy. I'm going to recognize that I want them and I'm going to eat them, but that doesn't mean I'm going to go off board the rest of the day. I'm still going to choose healthy, nutritional foods, not because I feel like I have to, but because I know that is what my body responds best to. That's what makes me feel the best physically, and it helps me perform the best physically. And, you know, it's also just better for you mentally. It's better for your brain to give it good nutrients, and just overall health, it's better for you. I think intuitive eating can be a good choice, a good just mental break for people who have been tracking for a long time, who, you know, have been pretty strict for a long time, but that also have a good understanding of food. I think intuitive eating can be really good for you. Like, now that I have a good structure and I have a good understanding of what's in food, I feel a lot more comfortable and confident in eating intuitively. It's also just a nice mental break sometimes. You know, some people I think get overwhelmed and stressed about tracking their food constantly and having to come up with meals and stuff. So it's nice once in a while just to take a mental break and just kind of go back to basics, just listen to your body. It's a good way to practice being more in tune with yourself and applying those skills on intuitive eating days, but then also taking what you learn and what you recognize from intuitive days and applying them to your other days too, like on days that say you track. It's just a good skill set to have. I also think it's like a good mental break coming off of competition season. I definitely think it is beneficial to have a couple of weeks where you reverse kind of strictly, just because when you're in a deficit for so long, you can't trust your hunger cues. You can't really trust your body because your body's been in starvation mode for so long that like your body doesn't necessarily really know whether it's hungry or not. So definitely I think it is beneficial to track and to reverse strictly for a couple of weeks before you start building in intuitive days again. But I think once kind of your hormones and your hunger cues and everything have kind of simmered and kind of come back to more homeostasis levels, it's a lot easier to eat intuitively because you're not obsessing with food anymore necessarily. And your hunger cues are going to be more accurate and kind of more on point. So yeah, like I really enjoy both. Like I personally really like tracking macros, but I also really like eating intuitively. Like, you know, obviously there's a time and place for both. For me as a bikini competitor, if I am in competition prep, I have to track macros. You know, for months, and that's just a part of the process. But now that I'm in my off season, I'm still reverse dieting. It's nice to have that freedom to eat intuitively and to not worry about the numbers and to kind of enjoy myself more. You know, it gives me that sense of balance, which I talked about last video or a couple of videos ago. I talked about what balance means to me. And I think that mentally being comfortable with building in intuitive days and not feeling stressed about it and not feeling guilty about it and not feeling I have to punish myself the next day for it, you know, whatever, it's balanced to me. Like the fact that I feel comfortable doing either tracking or not tracking and just eating intuitively. And it's not a skill that I built overnight, you know. I kind of had a hard time with it last summer after prepping. I had kind of a hard time with it in my reverse. But this year I am a lot more in tune with my body. Just overall, I'm a lot more mindful of how I'm eating, when I'm training, how I'm training. I'm just a lot more mindful of my goals and I'm a lot more mindful of my goals and just the work that needs to be done. So I'm in a better spot this year for intuitive eating and just mentally and physically. So I've really enjoyed it this year. You know, would I recommend one over the other? No, not necessarily, because it's gonna vary person to person. Like, you know, intuitive eating will work really well for some people, but maybe not others for, you know, X number of reasons. And the same for tracking macros. You know, like I said, there are certain people or certain situations where it really may not be appropriate, where you may have to take a more holistic, intuitive approach, just because it's easy to get caught up in the numbers and to be afraid of numbers, to be afraid of hitting a certain calorie goal, you know. And so sometimes situations like that, it's easier if you just aren't looking at those numbers and you don't necessarily know. Your body knows how much it needs, and your body will tell you what it needs. You know, you just have to build a trusting relationship with your body, and that can be really hard because society teaches us to hate our bodies, you know, to do certain things but not other things. And, you know, there seems to be more of a movement now of getting back to the basics and just being more holistic and in tune with yourself. But, you know, most of us, whether we realize it or not, have been getting these subliminal messages from a really young age. And basically, like, society teaches us to hate our bodies and to not listen to the basic cues, you know? Like, when you think about a little kid only eats when they're hungry and they stop when they're not, because they haven't been taught yet to not listen to their body, that they need to, you know, meet these silly criteria or listen to these stupid, kind of silly societal rules. So for me, eating intuitively is really just getting back to basics, like getting back to listening and understanding what my body is telling me. That's really what it comes down to. Like, your body knows what it needs and what it wants, and, you know, there's this little voice inside of us that's constantly telling us, and, you know, a lot of times we kind of ignore that voice and push it away. But intuitive eating has taught me, no, like, embrace that voice, you know, listen to that voice, and just, you know, if you listen to your body and give it what it needs, it comes around full circle. Like, you feel better, you'll probably look happier and healthier. You know, you have to put good in to get good out. So I don't know, I feel like I just like rambled for 20 minutes, and I don't know if any of that made sense, but that's just kind of a basic overview how I personally feel about both. Like this week, for example, I have macros that I'm hitting, but for the most of the week, I'm just eating intuitively. Now, there are some days that I will track when I eat intuitively, not because I'm trying to hit certain numbers, but just kind of out of curiosity to see, like, when I just naturally listen to my body and just kind of eat whatever, you know, where do I kind of naturally fall in terms of macros? Just to see, it's interesting to see kind of where your body is at. I wouldn't necessarily recommend tracking on intuitive days. I'll only do it once in a while. I don't track every intuitive day. Like, most intuitive days, I won't even pull out my Fitness Pal because there's no need. I have enough of a general understanding of nutrition and what good nutrition is that I can feel confident in the choices that I make. So yeah, you know, this isn't like very necessarily informative. Like I didn't do a ton of research on this, but there are topics that I want to talk about in future episodes of Education with Elge. That definitely I will do some research for you guys. I will look at what the literature says and try to give you guys good sound information. So, you know, this is just like my intro to this little series I'm going to try to do. Ideally, I will put out a video every week, maybe every couple of weeks. Let me know if you guys like this idea of doing Education with Elge videos. You know, pros and cons, whatever, what you like, what you don't like, any topics you would want to have me talk about. Like I am more than open to suggestions and recommendations. Tell me guys what you want. That's what I'm here for. This channel, yes, it's good for me because it's like a brain dump, but it's mostly like it's for you guys. It's what you guys want to see, what you guys want to hear. So like always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. The ones, you know, that you guys come around every time I post a video, you guys are good shits. I appreciate it. You know, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down, but tell me why. Either way, you chose what you chose. And if you're feeling a little sassy, a little saucy, subscribe to my channel. As you can probably see, when I post and what I post is like pretty sporadic. I don't have like a set schedule for posting, so it's kind of like when I have the time, when I'm inspired, when I have something to post about, that's pretty much when I do it. So subscribe just so that way you can keep up to date on videos and that way you don't miss anything. And that's it. Thanks guys. I'll see you in the next one.